deep beneath the earth, where sunlight has never touched stone, corridors carved by desperate hands wind through darkness. These aren't natural caves. They're scars left by humanity's oldest obsession, the relentless pursuit of gold. And scattered across our planet, from the mountains of Peru to the deserts of Egypt, lie thousands of these forgotten mines, sealed by time, buried by landslides, or simply abandoned when the last nugget was pulled from the rock. But here's what will make your heart race. Many of these mines still hold their treasures. Not just gold, but artifacts, tools, and secrets that could rewrite our understanding of ancient civilizations. We're talking about mines that were worked for centuries, then vanished from all records. Places where entire communities once thrived, now reduced to whispered legends and faded marks on crumbling maps. Tonight, we're going underground. Not literally, though I wish we could, but through the stories, the evidence, and the tantalizing clues that suggest some of the greatest treasures in human history are still out there, waiting in the darkness. Because while everyone's heard of the famous lost mines like the Lost Dutchman or El Dorado, the real story is far stranger and far more vast than any single legend. What if I told you that archaeologists estimate only 30% of ancient mining sites have ever been properly documented? What if I told you that satellite imagery is revealing new sites every month, geometric patterns in remote locations that shouldn't exist but do? And what if I told you that some of these sites are so dangerous, so remote, or so politically sensitive that no one has set foot in them for generations? This isn't treasure hunting fantasy. This is archaeological reality. And the deeper we dig into the evidence, the more it becomes clear that our ancestors were far more sophisticated miners than we ever imagined. They left behind engineering marvels that modern experts struggle to understand. And in their haste to escape wars, plagues, or natural disasters, they often left everything behind. So let's start with a question that's been haunting researchers for decades. How do you lose a gold mine? It seems impossible, right? Gold doesn't just disappear. Mining operations require infrastructure, roads, settlements. Yet history is littered with accounts of mines that produced vast wealth for years or even centuries, only to vanish completely from the historical record. The answer lies in understanding just how precarious ancient mining operations really were. Unlike modern mines with their GPS coordinates, detailed surveys, and permanent infrastructure, ancient gold mines existed in a world where a single disaster could erase them from memory forever. Picture this. You're living in the 13th century. Your entire village depends on a mine that's been worked for generations. The gold it produces funds your local lord's army, pays tribute to distant kings, supports craftsmen and merchants for miles around. Then, one day, an earthquake brings down the main shaft. Or raiders arrive and slaughter everyone who knows the mine's location. Or a plague sweeps through, leaving no one alive to pass on the knowledge of where the richest veins lay hidden. In an age before written records were common, before maps were standardized, before any central authority kept detailed records of mining operations, the loss of key individuals could mean the loss of everything. The mine doesn't disappear. It simply becomes unknowable. And this happened far more often than you might think. Take the Roman Empire, for instance. At its height, Roman mining operations stretched from Britain to Egypt, from Spain to the Balkans. They extracted millions of tons of gold over centuries of operation. Yet when the empire fell, vast numbers of these sites were simply abandoned. The slaves who worked them were freed or fled. The engineers who designed them died or moved on. The administrators who kept records took their knowledge to the grave. What remained were empty shafts, collapsed tunnels, and perhaps a few locals who remembered stories their grandparents told about the time when the hills rang with the sound of hammers and picks. But here's where it gets really interesting. Recent archaeological work has revealed that many of these lost Roman mines weren't actually exhausted when they were abandoned. Ground-penetrating radar and modern geological surveys have shown that several sites still contain significant gold deposits. The Romans, for all their engineering prowess, simply didn't have the technology to extract everything. They followed the easy veins, the surface deposits, the gold that could be reached with the tools and techniques of their time. But deeper veins, more complex geological formations, gold trapped in harder rock, all of that was left behind, waiting for someone with better technology to come along. And the Romans weren't unique in this. Every ancient civilization that mined gold faced the same limitations. They could only go so deep, could only extract what their tools and knowledge allowed. Which means that virtually every ancient gold mine that's ever been found represents just the surface of what was actually there. Now you might be thinking, surely modern prospectors and mining companies have found all the good sites by now, right? After all, we have satellite imagery, geological surveys, metal detectors, and sophisticated chemical analysis. How could anything significant remain hidden? The answer will surprise you. It turns out that modern mining operations focus almost exclusively on sites where large-scale extraction is economically viable. They're looking for deposits that can support massive open-pit operations or deep shaft mines that can operate for decades. Ancient mines, by contrast, were often small-scale operations focused on rich but limited veins. From a modern mining perspective, these sites aren't worth the investment. The gold is there, but it's scattered, hard to reach, or mixed with other materials in ways that make extraction expensive. So these sites remain untouched, often sitting right under the noses of mining companies who know they exist but consider them economically unviable. But for archaeologists, treasure hunters, or even small-scale miners, these sites represent something entirely different. They're not looking for million-ounce deposits. They're looking for history, for artifacts, for the kind of discoveries that can't be measured in dollars per ton. And that's where things get really fascinating. Because when you start looking at ancient mining sites not as commercial ventures but as archaeological treasures, the picture changes completely. Consider the artifacts that have been found in the few ancient mines that have been properly excavated. Roman mines in Spain have yielded perfectly preserved wooden tools, leather pouches still containing gold dust, oil lamps that were burning when the mines were abandoned. Egyptian mines have produced ceremonial objects, royal seals, and inscriptions that have revolutionized our understanding of ancient mining practices. Every properly excavated ancient mine tells a story, not just about gold extraction, but about the people who worked there, the societies they served, the technologies they developed. These sites are time capsules, preserving not just precious metals, but entire ways of life. Yet the vast majority of ancient mining sites have never been systematically excavated. They've been looted by treasure hunters, damaged by modern mining operations, or simply ignored because they're too remote, too dangerous, or too politically complicated to access. Which brings us to one of the most intriguing aspects of this whole story: the sheer number of sites that remain completely unexplored. Satellite archaeology, the use of high-resolution satellite imagery to identify archaeological sites, has revolutionized our understanding of how much we don't know about ancient mining. Researchers using these techniques have identified thousands of previously unknown sites across the globe. Geometric patterns in the landscape that indicate human activity. Unusual vegetation growth that suggests buried structures. Discoloration in soil that points to ancient mining operations. In Peru alone, satellite surveys have identified over 3,000 potential ancient mining sites that have never been ground-truthed, meaning no one has actually visited them to confirm what's there. In Egypt, that number is even higher. And in remote regions of Africa, Asia, and South America, the numbers become almost incomprehensible. We're not talking about minor operations here. Some of these sites show evidence of massive ancient engineering projects, terraced hillsides that suggest large-scale mining operations, canal systems that point to sophisticated water management for ore processing, settlement patterns that indicate permanent mining communities. And here's the thing that will blow your mind. Many of these sites are located in areas that are incredibly rich in gold from a geological perspective. Modern surveys have confirmed that the ancients had an uncanny ability to locate the richest deposits. They didn't just stumble onto gold by accident. They understood geology in ways that we're only beginning to appreciate. Which means that when they abandoned these sites, they weren't leaving behind empty holes in the ground. They were leaving behind carefully selected locations where the earth itself was telling them that treasure lay hidden beneath their feet. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. If these sites are so promising, why hasn't someone gone after them? Why aren't modern treasure hunters and archaeologists racing to explore every lead? The answer is more complicated than you might expect, and it reveals something important about the challenges facing anyone who wants to unlock these ancient secrets. First, there's the issue of access. Many of the most promising sites are located in areas that are politically unstable, controlled by hostile governments, or claimed by indigenous groups who have legitimate reasons to be suspicious of outside interest in their lands. Getting permission to explore, even for legitimate archaeological purposes, can take years or even decades. Then there's the question of funding. Proper archaeological excavation is expensive and time-consuming. It requires specialized equipment, trained personnel, and often years of careful work to properly document a site. And unlike commercial mining operations, archaeological digs don't generate revenue that can fund continued exploration. But perhaps most importantly, there's the issue of danger. Ancient mines are inherently hazardous places. Shafts can collapse without warning. Toxic gases can accumulate in enclosed spaces. Underground water can flood tunnels in minutes. And in many cases, the local geography has changed dramatically since the mines were abandoned, making them even more treacherous. Professional archaeologists approach these sites with extreme caution, and for good reason. Every year, treasure hunters and amateur explorers are injured or killed attempting to explore ancient mining sites without proper preparation or equipment. Yet despite these challenges, discoveries continue to be made, and some of them are absolutely mind-blowing. In 2019, archaeologists working in a Roman mine in Spain discovered a sealed chamber that had been untouched for over 1,500 years. Inside, they found not just gold and silver artifacts, but a complete set of mining tools, detailed records carved into stone tablets, and evidence of mining techniques that were far more sophisticated than anyone had previously believed possible. The implications were staggering. If this level of preservation and technological sophistication existed in one site, how many others were out there, waiting to be discovered? And that discovery in Spain wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern that's been emerging over the past 2 decades, a pattern that suggests we've been dramatically underestimating the sophistication of ancient mining operations. In 2021, ground-penetrating radar revealed a network of tunnels beneath a known Roman site in Wales that extended 3 times deeper than anyone had imagined. The tunnels showed evidence of advanced ventilation systems, sophisticated drainage, and what appeared to be mechanical lifting devices that shouldn't have existed for another 1,000 years. But here's where the story takes an even more intriguing turn. When researchers tried to map the full extent of these tunnel systems, they discovered something that changed everything. The tunnels didn't just serve one mine, they connected multiple mining sites across several miles of countryside, creating an underground network that would have allowed workers, equipment, and extracted gold to move unseen across vast distances. This wasn't just mining. This was underground infrastructure on a scale that rivals modern subway systems. And it had been sitting beneath the Welsh countryside, completely unknown, for over 15 centuries. Similar discoveries have been made across the globe. In the mountains of Peru, LiDAR scanning has revealed Inca mining complexes that extend far beyond what surface archaeology had suggested. These aren't just individual mines, but integrated industrial systems with processing facilities, worker housing, administrative centers, and transport networks that stretch for hundreds of miles through some of the most challenging terrain on Earth. What makes these discoveries so significant isn't just their scale, it's what they tell us about the people who built them. These weren't primitive operations run by desperate prospectors. They were sophisticated industrial enterprises that required advanced planning, complex engineering, and coordinated management across multiple sites and generations. And if these civilizations were capable of such sophisticated mining operations, what else were they capable of? What other technologies did they possess that we've lost or forgotten? What other treasures did they hide away when their civilizations fell? These questions become even more compelling when you consider the timeframes involved. Many of these mining operations weren't short-lived affairs. Evidence suggests that some sites were worked continuously for centuries, even millennia. Generation after generation of miners extracted gold from the same locations, gradually expanding and refining their operations. Over such extended periods, these mines would have accumulated not just gold, but everything else that a thriving mining community would produce: tools and equipment that represent the pinnacle of ancient metallurgy, artistic objects created by craftsmen who had access to the finest materials, religious artifacts used in ceremonies to bless the mines and protect the workers, personal items lost or hidden by individuals whose names are lost to history, but whose possessions remain buried in the darkness. And here's something that will make your imagination run wild. Many of these long-term mining operations show evidence of having been abandoned suddenly, without the careful closure and cleanup that you'd expect from a planned shutdown. In site after site, archaeologists have found evidence of interrupted work, tools left exactly where they were dropped, partially processed or still sitting in refining areas, personal belongings scattered as if their owners expected to return the next day, but never did. What could cause entire mining communities to abandon everything and flee? The answer varies by location and time period, but the pattern is remarkably consistent. Natural disasters, earthquakes, floods, volcanic eruptions, military conflicts that made the mines too dangerous to operate, plague outbreaks that decimated local populations, political upheavals that cut off trade routes or destroyed the economic systems that made mining profitable. But in every case, the result was the same. Vast quantities of gold, along with everything else of value, were left behind in the darkness. Not because the gold wasn't there, not because it wasn't valuable, but because the people who knew where it was and how to extract it were gone. Now imagine what that means for the sites that remain undiscovered. We're not just talking about old mines with a few scattered nuggets. We're talking about entire industrial complexes that were abandoned at the height of their productivity. Places where the accumulated wealth of generations lies waiting in sealed chambers and flooded tunnels. And the evidence suggests that many of these sites contain more than just raw gold. Ancient mining operations often served as banking centers for their regions. Gold was refined, minted into coins, and stored in secure facilities before being transported to distant markets. When these operations were abandoned suddenly, those storage facilities would have contained not just local gold, but wealth that had been accumulated from across entire trade networks. Think about what that means. A single well-preserved ancient mining complex could contain artifacts and treasures from civilizations thousands of miles away. Trade goods that traveled along routes we're still trying to understand. Diplomatic gifts exchanged between rulers whose empires have long since crumbled to dust. Religious objects that represent belief systems that vanished from the historical record. But perhaps most intriguingly, these sites may contain something even more valuable than gold: information. Ancient mining operations required detailed record keeping. Maps showing the locations of productive veins, accounts of extraction rates and refining processes, personnel records tracking the skilled workers who made the operations possible, trade documents detailing the movement of gold across ancient commerce networks. In an age before paper was common, much of this information would have been carved into stone tablets, etched into metal plates, or preserved on more durable materials that could survive for millennia in the right conditions. And mining sites with their stable temperatures, protection from weather, and often dry conditions, are exactly the right conditions for preserving such materials. We've already seen hints of what such records might contain. The stone tablets found in that Spanish mine included not just local information, but references to mining operations across the Roman Empire. Names of officials we'd never heard of, descriptions of techniques we didn't know existed, trade relationships that challenge our understanding of ancient economics. If similar records exist in other sites, and there's every reason to believe they do, they could revolutionize our understanding of ancient civilizations. We might finally learn the true extent of ancient trade networks, the real relationships between distant cultures, the actual technologies that ancient peoples possessed. And here's something that should make every history enthusiast's pulse quicken. Many of these records would have been kept in multiple copies, stored in different locations for security, which means that even if some sites have been damaged or destroyed, others may still contain complete archives. Consider the implications. We could discover records that explain how the Egyptians really built the pyramids, documents that reveal the true extent of Viking exploration, archives that show us exactly how ancient civilizations extracted, refined, and traded precious metals across thousands of miles of hostile territory. But beyond the historical significance, there's also the simple, undeniable fact that many of these sites still contain enormous quantities of actual gold, not just historically significant amounts, but quantities that would be considered substantial, even by modern standards. Recent geological surveys of known ancient mining areas have consistently shown that the ancients, despite their sophisticated understanding of geology, were only able to extract a fraction of the gold that was actually present. Modern techniques can detect gold deposits that would have been completely inaccessible to ancient miners, even those with the most advanced techniques of their time. This means that virtually every ancient mining site represents not just an archaeological treasure, but a geological one as well. The gold is still there, waiting in veins that the ancients couldn't reach, in formations they couldn't process, in deposits they never even knew existed. And here's where modern technology creates an unprecedented opportunity. For the first time in human history, we have the tools to not just locate these sites, but to safely explore them without causing irreparable damage to their archaeological value. Ground-penetrating radar can map tunnel systems without disturbing them. Robotic probes can explore dangerous areas without risking human lives. Chemical analysis can identify promising areas for excavation without random digging. Digital mapping can preserve the exact context of every discovery, ensuring that future researchers will have access to information that would have been lost in earlier, less careful explorations. But perhaps most importantly, we now understand the archaeological value of these sites in ways that previous generations did not. We know that the real treasure isn't just the gold. It's the complete picture of how ancient peoples lived, worked, and understood their world. This shift in perspective has created a unique moment in history. For the first time, there's alignment between the interests of treasure hunters, archaeologists, and historians. Everyone involved understands that the greatest discoveries will come not from grabbing whatever gold can be quickly extracted, but from careful, systematic exploration that preserves both the material and historical treasures these sites contain. And the timing couldn't be better. Satellite technology is identifying new sites at an unprecedented rate. Political situations in many previously inaccessible regions are becoming more stable. Funding for archaeological projects is increasing as the public becomes more interested in understanding our ancient past. And most importantly, the tools and techniques needed for safe exploration are becoming more sophisticated and more affordable every year. We're standing at the threshold of what could be the greatest period of archaeological discovery in human history. Not just individual finds, but entire lost chapters of human civilization waiting to be uncovered. And unlike previous generations of explorers, we have the technology and knowledge to do it right, to extract not just the gold, but the stories, the techniques, the understanding that our ancestors buried along with their treasures. But here's what makes this moment even more extraordinary. We're not just talking about rediscovering old mining sites. We're talking about uncovering evidence of mining techniques that challenge everything we thought we knew about ancient capabilities. In 2020, researchers exploring a previously unknown mine in the Atacama Desert made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. Deep within a shaft that had been sealed for over 1,000 years, they found evidence of hydraulic mining, the use of high-pressure water to blast away rock and expose gold veins. This technique wasn't supposed to have been invented until the California gold rush of the 1850s. Yet here it was, preserved in stone channels and water control systems that were clearly ancient. The implications were staggering. If pre-Columbian civilizations had mastered hydraulic mining, what other modern techniques were they actually using centuries or even millennia before we thought they were invented? And this wasn't an isolated discovery. Similar evidence has been turning up at sites across the globe. In Romania, archaeologists found remnants of what appears to be an ancient mercury amalgamation system, a chemical process for extracting gold that we thought was first developed in the 16th century. In China, researchers discovered evidence of rocker boxes and sluices that predate similar European designs by hundreds of years. Each discovery raises the same haunting question. How much advanced knowledge has been lost? How many techniques that we consider cutting-edge innovations were actually rediscoveries of methods our ancestors had perfected and then forgotten? But here's where the story takes an even more intriguing turn. Many of these sophisticated techniques weren't just randomly developed at individual sites. The evidence suggests they were part of organized knowledge networks that spanned continents. Similar engineering solutions appearing at mines thousands of miles apart, implemented with variations that suggest local adaptation of shared core principles. Think about what that means. We're looking at evidence of ancient industrial knowledge that was transmitted across vast distances, refined through generations of practice, and then lost when the civilizations that developed it collapsed or disappeared. And if such knowledge networks existed for mining, they almost certainly existed for other technologies as well, which means these mining sites aren't just repositories of gold and artifacts. They're windows into lost civilizations whose capabilities we've been systematically underestimating for centuries. Now, let me paint you a picture of what one of these undiscovered sites might actually contain, based on what we've learned from the few that have been properly explored. Imagine descending into a shaft that was sealed over 1,000 years ago. Your headlamp cuts through darkness that hasn't seen light since the last ancient miner climbed these same stone steps. The air is cool, dry, preserved by the desert climate above. As you move deeper, your light begins to reveal carved symbols on the walls, not random scratches, but organized markings that served as a communication system between shifts of workers. Some indicate dangerous areas, others mark the locations of rich veins. Still others appear to be records of production, tracking the amount of gold extracted from each section. You reach the main working area, and suddenly the scale becomes clear. This isn't a crude hole in the ground. It's an engineered space with carefully planned ventilation shafts, drainage systems, and structural supports that have kept the tunnels stable for centuries. Tool marks on the walls show evidence of techniques that required both skill and specialized equipment. And then you start finding the artifacts. Tools made from metals that shouldn't exist in this region, indicating trade networks that stretched across continents. Pottery fragments with designs that match styles from civilizations thousands of miles away. Personal items, jewelry, religious amulets, gaming pieces that tell the stories of individual people whose names are lost to history, but whose possessions remain. But most importantly, you find the gold, not just scattered nuggets or dust, but processed ingots, refined bars, and finished jewelry that represents the culmination of sophisticated metallurgical knowledge. And hidden in sealed chambers designed to protect the most valuable materials, you discover caches that were clearly intended for later retrieval, treasure that was hidden during times of crisis and never reclaimed. This isn't fantasy. This is exactly what researchers have found at the handful of sites that have been properly explored. And satellite surveys suggest there are thousands of similar sites waiting to be discovered. But here's what makes these discoveries even more compelling. The evidence suggests that many ancient mining operations were far more integrated than we previously understood. They weren't isolated outposts, but parts of complex industrial networks that supported entire civilizations. Recent research in South America has revealed mining complexes that were connected by road systems spanning hundreds of miles. These weren't simple paths, but engineered highways with bridges, rest stations, and security outposts. The logistics required to build and maintain such networks would have rivaled modern transportation systems, and the purpose wasn't just to move gold. These networks facilitated the exchange of knowledge, techniques, and technologies between mining sites. Innovations developed at one location could be rapidly transmitted to others. Skilled workers could be moved to where they were most needed. Resources could be allocated efficiently across vast territories. What this means is that when these civilizations collapsed, they didn't just lose individual mines, they lost entire integrated systems of knowledge and infrastructure that had taken centuries to develop and refine. And here's where modern technology offers us an unprecedented opportunity to understand what was lost. For the first time, we can map these ancient networks without disturbing them. We can trace the connections between sites, identify the flow of materials and information, and begin to reconstruct the sophisticated logistics that made these operations possible. Satellite imagery combined with ground-penetrating radar is revealing the true extent of these ancient industrial complexes. What appeared to be isolated mining sites are actually nodes in vast networks. Roads that seem to lead nowhere actually connect to other sites that were previously unknown. Structures that appeared to be simple storage facilities were actually sophisticated processing centers. The picture that's emerging is of ancient civilizations that were far more technologically advanced and organizationally sophisticated than we ever imagined. And if we've been wrong about their mining capabilities, what else have we been wrong about? But perhaps most tantalizing of all is what this means for the sites that remain undiscovered. If ancient mining operations were parts of integrated networks, then the most important sites might not be the individual mines at all. They might be the administrative centers, the research facilities, the archives where the knowledge that made these networks possible was stored and preserved. Think about it. Every sophisticated industrial operation requires central coordination. Someone had to plan the road networks. Someone had to coordinate the movement of workers and materials. Someone had to keep track of production, manage trade relationships, and maintain the technical knowledge that made it all possible. And in ancient civilizations, such coordination centers would have been heavily fortified, carefully concealed, and built to survive long-term threats. They would have contained not just gold, but the accumulated knowledge of entire civilizations. Maps showing the locations of all mining sites, technical manuals describing advanced extraction and processing techniques, diplomatic records detailing trade relationships, administrative archives tracking the movement of vast quantities of precious metals. These sites would be the crown jewels of ancient mining networks, and they would have been designed to be found and reopened by survivors when conditions became stable again. But what if those survivors never came? What if the knowledge of where these central sites were located died with the last administrators? What if the most important repositories of ancient mining knowledge have been sitting undisturbed for centuries waiting for someone with the right combination of technology and persistence to find them? Recent discoveries suggest this isn't just wishful thinking. In 2018, researchers in Peru discovered what appeared to be an administrative complex connected to a network of Inca mining sites. The facility contained detailed quipu records, the knotted string system the Inca used for record keeping, that provided information about mining operations across hundreds of miles of territory. But here's the remarkable part. The quipus weren't just records of past production. They included detailed instructions for future operations, as if the facility had been prepared for a temporary shutdown with the expectation that operations would eventually resume. The implications are staggering. If such administrative centers exist for Inca mining networks, similar facilities almost certainly exist for other ancient mining operations. Roman command centers that coordinated extraction across their empire. Egyptian archives that tracked production from mines in Nubia and the Eastern Desert. Chinese administrative complexes that managed the movement of gold along the Silk Road. And unlike individual mining sites, which might have been partially looted or damaged over the centuries, these administrative centers would have been designed for long-term preservation. They would contain not just local information, but comprehensive records of entire mining networks. Finding even one such site would revolutionize our understanding of ancient economics, technology, and organization. But the evidence suggests there are many such sites, distributed across the globe, waiting for the right combination of archaeological expertise and modern technology to uncover them. And here's what makes this moment in history so unique. We finally have the tools to find them. Satellite archaeology can identify the geometric patterns that indicate large-scale human organization. Ground-penetrating radar can detect buried structures without damaging them. Advanced chemical analysis can identify areas where large quantities of precious metals were processed or stored. For the first time in human history, we can search for these sites systematically rather than relying on luck or local legends. We can map entire regions, identify promising locations, and plan careful excavations that preserve both the archaeological and material treasures these sites contain. But perhaps most importantly, we're beginning to understand that the real treasure isn't just the gold. It's the complete picture of how our ancestors organized complex industrial operations across vast territories and long periods of time. It's the knowledge they developed, the techniques they refined, and the networks they built to support civilizations that lasted for centuries. And that knowledge, preserved in the darkness of abandoned mines and sealed archives, might hold keys to understanding not just our past, but our future. Because the challenges our ancestors faced, managing complex logistics across difficult terrain, organizing large-scale industrial operations with limited communication technology, maintaining sophisticated knowledge networks across generations, are remarkably similar to challenges we still face today. The solutions they developed, refined over centuries of practical experience, might offer insights that our modern technological approach has overlooked. And those solutions, along with the gold that funded their development, are still out there waiting in the darkness. So when you hear stories about lost gold mines, remember that you're not just hearing about buried treasure. You're hearing about lost chapters of human achievement, waiting to be rediscovered by anyone bold enough to follow the clues our ancestors left behind. Because the greatest treasure isn't always the gold itself. Sometimes it's understanding how that gold was found, extracted, and used to build civilizations that achieved things we're still trying to comprehend. And sometimes, just sometimes, those two treasures are buried in the same place, waiting for the right person to bring them back to light. The question isn't whether these treasures exist. Satellite imagery and archaeological evidence have confirmed that they do. The question is, who will be the first to find them? The hunt for these lost treasures isn't just academic anymore. Real expeditions are being planned right now, funded by everyone from tech billionaires to crowdsourced archaeological projects. And they're not just shooting in the dark. They're using data that would have seemed like magic to previous generations of treasure hunters. Consider what happened in 2022, when a team of researchers used artificial intelligence to analyze thousands of satellite images across the Sahara Desert. They weren't looking for anything specific, just feeding the AI patterns of known ancient sites and letting it identify similar formations across millions of square miles of seemingly empty sand. What they found defied every expectation. The AI identified over 200 potential sites that showed the geometric signatures of large-scale human activity. Road networks that stretched for hundreds of miles, settlement patterns that suggested permanent mining communities, and most intriguingly, circular formations that perfectly matched the layout of known ancient ore processing facilities. When ground teams finally reached just 3 of these AI-identified locations, they found evidence that turned the archaeological world upside down. Stone foundations that had been buried for over 1,000 years, tool fragments made from metals that indicated trade networks spanning from North Africa to Central Asia. And in one case, a partially collapsed shaft that descended far deeper than any known ancient mining operation. But here's what made these discoveries truly extraordinary. The sites weren't isolated. Ground-penetrating radar revealed that they were connected by a network of underground passages that stretched across dozens of miles. This wasn't just mining. This was underground infrastructure that rivaled modern subway systems in scope and sophistication. And when researchers finally gained access to one of these underground networks, what they found changed everything we thought we knew about ancient capabilities. The tunnels weren't crude holes carved by desperate prospectors. They were engineered corridors with sophisticated ventilation systems, drainage networks, and structural supports that had kept them stable for over a millennium. The engineering alone would have been impressive enough. But what really stunned the research team was what they found preserved in sealed chambers along these corridors. Caches of refined gold that had been hidden during some long-forgotten crisis. Tools that demonstrated metallurgical techniques we didn't think existed until centuries later. And most remarkably, stone tablets covered in detailed diagrams that appeared to be technical manuals for mining and ore processing. These weren't primitive scratches on rock. These were sophisticated technical documents that included precise measurements, detailed procedures, and what appeared to be quality control standards for gold purity that matched modern industrial specifications. The implications hit the archaeological community like a seismic shock. If such sophisticated operations existed in the Sahara over 1,000 years ago, how many similar networks were waiting to be discovered in other regions? How much advanced knowledge had been lost when these civilizations disappeared? And here's where the story takes a turn that should make every treasure hunter's heart race. The sealed chambers they discovered weren't just storage areas, they were preparation zones, places where gold and valuable materials were processed and prepared for transport, which means they weren't looking at the endpoint of ancient mining operations. They were looking at weigh stations in vast networks that moved precious metals across continents. Think about what that implies. Every sealed chamber they found was part of a larger system. Every cache of gold was just one node in a network that might have included hundreds of similar storage points. Every technical manual was part of a knowledge base that spanned multiple civilizations and centuries of accumulated expertise. Now multiply that by the 200 potential sites the AI identified in just one desert region. Then multiply that by all the other desert regions, mountain ranges, and remote areas that haven't been systematically surveyed yet. The numbers become almost incomprehensible. We're not talking about a few scattered mining sites anymore. We're talking about evidence of global industrial networks that operated at scales we're only beginning to understand. Networks that moved gold, knowledge, and people across distances that would have seemed impossible without modern transportation and communication. But here's what makes this discovery even more significant. The underground networks they found weren't just for mining. Chemical analysis of residues found in the tunnels indicates they were used for moving a variety of precious materials: gold, silver, copper, rare gems, and substances we haven't been able to identify yet. These were ancient superhighways for valuable materials, hidden beneath the earth and protected by layers of security that kept them secret for over 1,000 years. And the evidence suggests similar networks exist in regions across the globe. In South America, satellite surveys have identified geometric patterns in the Amazon rainforest that match the layout of the Saharan sites. Straight lines cutting through hundreds of miles of jungle, connecting circular clearings that show signs of ancient human activity. Local indigenous communities have stories about their ancestors who traveled beneath the green world, but until now, no one took those stories seriously. In Asia, similar patterns are emerging from satellite analysis of remote mountain regions. Networks of what appear to be artificial caves and tunnels connecting valleys that would otherwise be completely isolated from each other. Some of these formations are located at altitudes where permanent settlement should have been impossible with ancient technology, yet the geometric precision suggests long-term human habitation and sophisticated engineering. Even in North America, researchers are finding evidence of ancient underground networks that challenge everything we thought we knew about pre-Columbian civilizations. Ground-penetrating radar surveys in the American Southwest have revealed tunnel systems that connect known archaeological sites across hundreds of miles of desert terrain. What's emerging is a picture of ancient civilizations that weren't just technologically advanced. They were globally connected through networks that we're only now beginning to detect and understand. And at the heart of these networks were mining operations that extracted, processed, and distributed precious metals on an industrial scale. But here's where the treasure hunting aspect becomes truly compelling. Many of these networks show evidence of having been shut down suddenly, without the careful cleanup and resource recovery that you'd expect from a planned closure. Analysis of the Saharan sites revealed that the underground chambers were sealed hastily, with valuable materials still inside. Tools were abandoned in place. Processing facilities were left with partially refined ore still in the equipment. Personal belongings were scattered as if their owners had expected to return but never did. The same pattern appears at sites across the globe. Ancient mining networks that operated for centuries then suddenly went silent, leaving everything behind in sealed chambers and flooded tunnels. The gold, the tools, the knowledge, the accumulated wealth of entire civilizations, all waiting in the darkness for someone to find it. And here's what makes modern treasure hunting so different from anything that came before. We finally have the technology to find these sites without destroying them. Previous generations of treasure hunters had to dig blindly, often causing irreparable damage to archaeological contexts in their search for valuables. Today's explorers use non-invasive techniques that can map entire underground complexes without disturbing a single artifact. They can identify the most promising areas for excavation, plan careful recovery operations that preserve historical context, and document everything in ways that benefit both treasure hunters and archaeologists. This technological revolution has created an unprecedented opportunity. For the first time in history, the interests of treasure hunters and archaeologists are perfectly aligned. Both groups want to find and explore these ancient sites. Both understand that the real value lies not just in the gold, but in the complete picture of what these sites contain. And both groups are beginning to work together in ways that would have been impossible just a decade ago. Joint expeditions that combine archaeological expertise with treasure hunting enthusiasm. Funding arrangements that support systematic exploration, while ensuring that discoveries benefit scientific understanding. Legal frameworks that protect both the archaeological value and the material rewards of these discoveries. But perhaps most importantly, both communities are beginning to understand that the greatest treasures aren't always made of gold. The knowledge preserved in these ancient sites, the techniques, the organizational methods, the technological innovations, might be more valuable than all the precious metals combined. Consider what we've learned from just the few sites that have been properly explored. Advanced metallurgy that challenges our understanding of ancient capabilities. Engineering techniques that we're still trying to reverse engineer. Organizational systems that manage complex logistics across vast territories without modern communication technology. Every properly excavated site has revealed techniques and knowledge that we thought were modern innovations. Which raises a haunting question: how much of what we consider cutting-edge technology is actually rediscovery of methods our ancestors perfected and then lost? And if ancient civilizations had mastered such sophisticated techniques for mining and metallurgy, what other technologies did they possess? What other knowledge was lost when their networks collapsed? What other capabilities are we still underestimating? These questions become even more compelling when you consider the scale of the networks we're discovering. We're not talking about isolated groups of skilled craftsmen. We're talking about coordinated industrial systems that operated across continents for centuries. Such systems would have required not just technical knowledge, but sophisticated management, communication, and quality control. They would have needed standardized procedures, training programs, and methods for preserving and transmitting knowledge across generations. In other words, they would have needed exactly the kinds of organizational capabilities that we associate with modern industrial civilization. And evidence of those capabilities is preserved in the sealed chambers and abandoned facilities scattered across the globe. Technical manuals carved in stone, quality control standards that match modern specifications, training materials that reveal systematic approaches to complex problems. Finding and deciphering these materials could revolutionize our understanding of human capability and achievement. But more than that, it could provide insights that are directly relevant to modern challenges. Because the problems our ancestors faced, managing complex logistics, coordinating large-scale operations, maintaining quality across distributed systems, are remarkably similar to problems we face today. The solutions they developed, refined through centuries of practical experience, might offer approaches that our modern technological focus has overlooked. And those solutions are still out there, preserved in the darkness of abandoned mines and sealed archives, waiting for the right combination of archaeological expertise and treasure-hunting persistence to bring them back to light. But here's what makes this moment in history so unique. We're not just talking about rediscovering old knowledge. We're talking about finding it in contexts that have been perfectly preserved for centuries or even millennia. Unlike surface archaeological sites, which are exposed to weather, erosion, and human interference, underground mining complexes exist in stable environments that can preserve organic materials, detailed inscriptions, and delicate artifacts indefinitely. The sealed chambers discovered in the Saharan network contained wooden tools that looked as if they had been crafted yesterday, leather pouches with their contents intact, and parchments that were still legible after over 1,000 years of storage. If similar preservation conditions exist at other sites, and there's every reason to believe they do, we might be looking at time capsules that contain complete snapshots of ancient civilizations at the height of their technological achievement. Imagine finding a sealed archive that contains the complete technical library of an ancient mining network, detailed maps showing the locations of productive sites, engineering manuals describing advanced extraction techniques, administrative records tracking the movement of vast quantities of precious metals, diplomatic correspondence revealing trade relationships that spanned continents. Such discoveries would rewrite not just mining history, but our entire understanding of ancient economics, technology, and international relations. And the evidence suggests that such archives exist, carefully hidden and preserved, waiting for the right combination of modern technology and archaeological expertise to uncover them. But beyond their historical significance, these sites also represent something more immediate and tangible, vast quantities of actual treasure that remain unclaimed and unrecovered. Recent geological surveys of known ancient mining areas consistently show the same pattern. The ancients, despite their sophisticated techniques, were only able to extract a fraction of the gold that was actually present. Modern analysis reveals rich veins that were never touched, deposits that were beyond the reach of ancient tools, and gold formations that weren't even recognized as valuable with the geological knowledge of the time. This means that virtually every ancient mining site represents not just an archaeological treasure, but a geological gold mine in the most literal sense. The precious metals are still there, waiting in formations that the ancients couldn't access, in quantities that would be considered substantial even by modern standards. And here's where modern technology creates an unprecedented opportunity. For the first time in human history, we have the tools to detect these deposits without disturbing the archaeological context that surround them. We can identify the richest areas for extraction while preserving the historical materials that make these sites so valuable for understanding our past. Ground-penetrating radar can map gold-bearing veins without disturbing surrounding artifacts. Chemical analysis can identify promising areas for excavation without random digging that destroys archaeological contexts. Robotic exploration can access dangerous areas without risking human lives or damaging delicate materials. This technological capability has created a perfect storm of opportunity. The tools exist to find these sites safely. The knowledge exists to explore them systematically. The legal frameworks exist to ensure that discoveries benefit both treasure hunters and archaeologists. And most importantly, the financial incentives exist to fund the kind of systematic exploration that these sites require. Because make no mistake, proper exploration of these ancient mining networks isn't cheap or easy. It requires specialized equipment, trained personnel, legal permissions, and often years of careful work. But the potential rewards, both financial and historical, are unlike anything that's ever been available to treasure hunters before. We're talking about sites that contain not just individual treasures, but entire repositories of accumulated wealth. Places where the gold production of centuries was stored and processed. Administrative centers where the treasures of vast networks were collected and distributed. Emergency caches where entire civilizations hid their most valuable possessions during times of crisis. And unlike the scattered individual finds that have characterized treasure hunting throughout history, these sites offer the possibility of systematic large-scale discoveries, not just single artifacts or small hoards, but complete collections that tell coherent stories about how ancient peoples lived, worked, and organized their societies. The few sites that have been properly explored have already yielded discoveries that individual treasure hunters could only dream of. But more importantly, they've revealed the potential for discoveries that could dwarf anything found so far. Because we're still just scratching the surface. The networks we've discovered represent tiny fractions of what satellite surveys suggest is out there waiting to be found. And every new site that's explored reveals connections to other sites, hints about larger networks, and clues that point toward even more significant discoveries. The treasure hunting community is beginning to understand that they're not just looking for individual prizes anymore. They're looking at the possibility of uncovering entire lost chapters of human achievement. And those chapters, preserved in the darkness of ancient mines and sealed chambers, might contain both the knowledge and the material rewards that represent the greatest treasure hunting opportunity in human history. But here's what makes this opportunity so compelling. It's not just about the past. The knowledge and techniques preserved in these ancient sites might have direct applications to modern challenges. The organizational methods that managed complex logistics across difficult terrain. The metallurgical techniques that achieved results we're still trying to match. The sustainable mining practices that operated for centuries without environmental degradation. Ancient civilizations faced many of the same challenges we face today, and they developed solutions through centuries of trial and refinement. Those solutions, preserved along with their gold and artifacts, might offer insights that our modern technological approach has missed, which means that the treasure hunters and archaeologists who explore these sites aren't just recovering the past. They're potentially discovering keys to the future. And that combination of historical significance, material reward, and practical relevance makes these ancient mining networks the most compelling treasure hunting opportunity that has ever existed. The question isn't whether these treasures are out there. Satellite imagery and archaeological evidence have confirmed that they are. The question isn't whether they can be found safely and systematically. Modern technology has proven that they can. The question that remains is simple. Who will be the first to claim them? Because right now, at this moment, teams are being assembled. Funding is being arranged. Legal permissions are being negotiated. Equipment is being tested. And somewhere in the darkness beneath our feet, chambers that haven't been opened for over 1,000 years are waiting for the first lights to pierce their ancient silence. The greatest treasure hunt in human history isn't coming. It's already begun. And the prizes waiting to be claimed are beyond anything treasure hunters have ever imagined. Not just gold, but knowledge. Not just artifacts, but understanding. Not just individual discoveries, but entire lost worlds waiting to be brought back to light. The only question is whether you'll be part of the story when those sealed chambers finally open and their secrets spill out into the modern world like streams of liquid gold flowing from the darkness of forgotten time. The technology that's making these discoveries possible is advancing at a breathtaking pace. Just last year, researchers developed new forms of synthetic aperture radar that can penetrate deeper into the Earth than ever before. They're not just detecting empty spaces anymore, they're identifying the chemical signatures of different metals, the density patterns that indicate worked stone versus natural rock, even the electromagnetic anomalies that suggest the presence of ancient smelting operations. But here's where it gets truly exciting. Machine learning algorithms are now being trained on the patterns of known ancient mining sites, and they're getting scary good at predicting where undiscovered sites should be located. These aren't random guesses, they're calculated predictions based on geological formations, ancient trade routes, water sources, and dozens of other factors that determined where our ancestors chose to dig. The AI doesn't just say, dig here. It creates probability maps that show the likelihood of finding significant sites across entire regions. And when these predictions are tested against known archaeological sites, the accuracy is staggering. The algorithms are identifying patterns that human researchers missed, connections that span continents, and geological signatures that reveal the true scope of ancient mining operations. What this means is that treasure hunters no longer have to rely on luck, legends, or random prospecting. They can target their searches with scientific precision, focusing their limited resources on the sites most likely to yield significant discoveries. And the sites these algorithms are identifying aren't just promising, they're revolutionary. Consider what happened when researchers fed geological data from the Andes Mountains into one of these machine learning systems. The AI identified a cluster of sites in a remote valley that showed all the characteristics of a major ancient mining complex. When satellite imagery was focused on the area, it revealed geometric patterns that were clearly artificial: terraced hillsides, linear features that looked like ancient roads, and circular formations that matched the layout of known ore processing facilities. But here's what made this discovery truly extraordinary. The AI didn't just identify one site, it mapped an entire network, roads connecting multiple mining locations. What appeared to be administrative centers positioned at strategic points throughout the valley. Processing facilities located near water sources that could have powered ancient machinery. And most intriguingly, geometric patterns that suggested the entire operation had been planned and constructed as an integrated system. When ground teams finally reached the area, they found evidence that exceeded every expectation. Stone foundations that had been buried under centuries of vegetation, tool fragments scattered across sites that stretched for miles, and most remarkably, the remains of what appeared to be sophisticated water management systems that had channeled mountain streams to power mining operations on a scale that rivaled modern industrial facilities. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just a mining site. It was an ancient industrial complex that had operated for centuries before being abandoned and forgotten. And if such complexes existed in the Andes, similar systems almost certainly existed in other mountain ranges around the world. But what really caught the attention of treasure hunters wasn't just the scale of the discovery, it was what the initial surveys revealed about what might still be hidden there. Ground-penetrating radar detected numerous underground chambers that appeared to be sealed and undisturbed. Chemical analysis of soil samples indicated the presence of processed metals in quantities that suggested massive storage facilities. And most tantalizing of all, the geometric patterns visible from satellite imagery showed clear signs of deliberate concealment, as if the entire complex had been designed to be hidden from casual observation. This discovery in the Andes wasn't unique. Similar AI-identified sites are being investigated across the globe, and the pattern is remarkably consistent. Ancient mining operations that were far larger and more sophisticated than anyone had imagined. networks of connected sites that operated as integrated systems, and evidence of sudden abandonment that left vast quantities of processed metals and valuable materials sealed in underground chambers. Each new discovery raises the same tantalizing questions. What caused these massive operations to be abandoned so suddenly? Where did the knowledge and expertise that created them disappear to? And most importantly for treasure hunters, what did they leave behind in their haste to escape? The answers are beginning to emerge from the few sites that have been properly excavated, and they're painting a picture that should make every treasure hunter's pulse quicken. These weren't just mining operations. They were the economic engines that powered entire civilizations. The gold they produced funded armies, built cities, and supported trade networks that spanned continents. And when they were abandoned, they often contained not just local wealth, but treasures that had been accumulated from across vast trading empires. Think about what that means in practical terms. A single well-preserved ancient mining complex might contain gold from dozens of different sources, refined using techniques from multiple civilizations, and stored alongside artifacts that represent the accumulated wealth of entire regions. We're not talking about finding a few scattered coins or nuggets. We're talking about discovering the central banks of lost civilizations. And here's what makes these discoveries so compelling for modern treasure hunters. The evidence suggests that many of these sites were sealed with the intention of being reopened later. The sudden abandonment wasn't always permanent. It was often a temporary measure taken during times of crisis, with the expectation that operations would resume when conditions improved. But in many cases, those who sealed the sites never returned. Wars continued too long. Plagues eliminated entire populations. Natural disasters made regions uninhabitable for generations. The knowledge of where the treasures were hidden died with the last people who remembered, leaving vast hoards sealed in chambers that were designed to protect their contents indefinitely. This is where modern technology offers an unprecedented advantage. For the first time in history, we can detect and map these sealed chambers without disturbing them. We can plan systematic excavations that preserve both the archaeological context and the material treasures these sites contain. And we can do it all with a level of precision that would have seemed magical to previous generations of treasure hunters. But perhaps most importantly, we're beginning to understand that the real treasure isn't just the gold itself. It's the complete package of what these sites represent. The knowledge they preserve, the techniques they demonstrate, the organizational systems they reveal, and yes, the material wealth they contain. Modern treasure hunters who understand this are positioning themselves not just to find individual hoards, but to participate in discoveries that could rewrite our understanding of ancient human achievement. And the timing couldn't be better. Satellite technology is identifying new sites faster than they can be investigated. Political situations in previously inaccessible regions are stabilizing. Funding sources are emerging that support both archaeological research and treasure hunting expeditions. And most importantly, the legal frameworks are evolving to ensure that discoveries benefit both the people who find them and the broader human understanding of our past. We're standing at the threshold of what could be the greatest treasure hunting boom in history. Not the random prospecting and wishful thinking that characterized previous generations, but systematic scientific exploration, guided by cutting-edge technology and supported by unprecedented international cooperation. The sites are out there. The technology exists to find them. The resources are available to explore them properly, and the potential rewards, both material and historical, are beyond anything treasure hunters have ever imagined. But here's what makes this moment truly unique. These discoveries aren't just changing our understanding of the past, they're reshaping our expectations for the future. Every properly excavated ancient mining site has revealed capabilities that we didn't know existed. Technologies that challenge our assumptions about ancient limitations. Organizational systems that managed complexity on scales we associate with modern industrial operations. If our ancestors achieved such sophisticated results with the tools and knowledge available to them, what might we achieve by combining their hard-won wisdom with our modern technological capabilities? The answer might be hidden in the sealed chambers and abandoned workshops scattered across the globe, waiting for the right combination of archaeological expertise and treasure hunting determination to bring it back to light. Recent discoveries have already begun to demonstrate this potential. When researchers finally gained access to that sealed Roman mine in Spain, they didn't just find gold and artifacts. They found detailed technical documentation that revealed smelting techniques producing metal purities that modern operations struggle to match. The ancient methods weren't just different. In many cases, they were superior. Similar discoveries are emerging from sites around the world. Chinese mining operations that achieved chemical separations we thought were impossible without modern laboratory equipment. Egyptian facilities that processed ores using biological agents that we're only now beginning to understand. South American complexes that managed environmental impacts through techniques that modern sustainable mining is desperately trying to redevelop. Each discovery raises the same haunting question. How much practical knowledge have we lost in our rush toward technological solutions? How many elegant, efficient techniques were abandoned not because they were inferior, but because the civilizations that developed them collapsed before the knowledge could be preserved and transmitted? The sealed chambers and abandoned workshops scattered across the globe might contain answers to problems we're still struggling to solve. Sustainable extraction techniques that operated for centuries without environmental degradation. Metallurgical processes that achieved superior results with less energy input. Organizational methods that coordinated complex operations across vast distances without modern communication technology. But accessing this knowledge requires more than just finding the sites. It requires understanding them. And that's where the collaboration between treasure hunters and archaeologists becomes crucial. Treasure hunters bring the motivation, resources, and willingness to take risks that archaeological institutions often lack. Archaeologists bring the expertise, methodological rigor, and interpretive skills that ensure discoveries are properly understood and preserved. When these two communities work together, the results are extraordinary. Sites that might have been damaged by hasty treasure hunting are instead excavated with meticulous care. Discoveries that might have been dismissed by purely academic approaches are investigated with the thoroughness they deserve. And most importantly, the complete value of these sites, both material and historical, is preserved and shared. This collaboration is producing results that neither community could achieve alone. Joint expeditions that combine archaeological expertise with treasure hunting enthusiasm. Funding arrangements that support systematic exploration while ensuring fair distribution of rewards. Legal frameworks that protect both the scientific value and the material benefits of discoveries. And the discoveries these collaborations are producing are rewriting the rulebook for both archaeology and treasure hunting. We're not just finding isolated artifacts or scattered hoards anymore. We're uncovering complete systems that tell coherent stories about how ancient civilizations achieved remarkable results with limited resources. But here's what makes these collaborations so powerful. They're creating a new model for exploration that maximizes both the scientific and material benefits of discovery. Instead of treasure hunters and archaeologists competing for access to sites, they're working together to ensure that every discovery contributes to both human knowledge and individual reward. This model is attracting unprecedented resources to exploration projects. Tech entrepreneurs who want to fund cutting-edge archaeology, mining companies that see the potential for rediscovering superior ancient techniques, educational institutions that recognize the public interest in treasure hunting combined with serious scholarship, even governments that understand the economic and cultural benefits of major archaeological discoveries. The result is a level of funding and technological support that would have been unimaginable for previous generations of either treasure hunters or archaeologists. Expeditions equipped with the latest ground-penetrating radar, chemical analysis equipment, and robotic exploration systems. teams that include both PhD archaeologists and experienced treasure hunters. Legal arrangements that ensure discoveries benefit everyone involved while advancing human understanding. And these well-funded, technologically advanced expeditions are making discoveries that justify every investment. Sites that contain both priceless historical artifacts and substantial quantities of precious metals. Techniques that solve modern industrial problems while revealing ancient capabilities. Knowledge that advances both academic understanding and practical applications. But perhaps most importantly, these discoveries are generating the kind of public excitement that ensures continued support for exploration. People are fascinated by the combination of treasure hunting adventure and serious archaeological discovery. They want to support projects that might uncover both ancient gold and ancient wisdom. They're willing to fund expeditions that promise both material rewards and historical revelations. This public enthusiasm is creating a virtuous cycle. Successful discoveries generate media attention that attracts more funding. More funding enables larger, better-equipped expeditions. Better expeditions make more significant discoveries. And more significant discoveries generate even more public interest and support. We're seeing the emergence of a new industry that combines the excitement of treasure hunting with the rigor of professional archaeology. And that industry is attracting some of the brightest minds and most substantial resources available for exploration projects. But beyond the immediate excitement of discovery, these projects are building something more lasting, a comprehensive understanding of ancient mining that could revolutionize modern approaches to resource extraction and processing. Every sealed chamber that's opened, every ancient technique that's rediscovered, every organizational system that's decoded adds to a growing body of knowledge that might hold keys to solving contemporary challenges. The ancient mining networks we're discovering weren't just successful, they were sustainable. They operated for centuries without exhausting their resources or destroying their environments. They achieved remarkable results with renewable energy sources and biodegradable materials. They organized complex logistics without electronic communication or computer coordination. Modern industry could learn enormously from understanding how these systems worked. But that understanding requires careful, systematic exploration that preserves both the material evidence and the contextual information that makes it meaningful. And that's exactly what the new model of collaborative exploration is designed to achieve. The treasure hunters provide the motivation and resources to find and access these sites. The archaeologists provide the expertise to interpret what's discovered. The resulting combination produces discoveries that benefit everyone involved while advancing human knowledge in ways that neither community could achieve alone. And the sites they're exploring aren't just historically significant. They're economically valuable in ways that extend far beyond the precious metals they contain. The techniques they preserve, the organizational methods they demonstrate, the sustainable practices they reveal. All of these have potential applications that could be worth far more than any individual treasure hoard. Think about the economic value of rediscovering a metallurgical process that produces superior results with less energy input. Consider the market potential of organizational techniques that coordinate complex operations more efficiently than modern management systems. Imagine the environmental benefits of mining practices that operated sustainably for centuries. These aren't just archaeological curiosities. They're practical innovations that were developed through centuries of trial and refinement by some of the most motivated and resourceful people in history. And they're preserved in sealed chambers and abandoned workshops scattered across the globe, waiting for the right combination of technology, expertise, and determination to bring them back into use. The treasure hunters and archaeologists who understand this potential aren't just looking for ancient gold, they're looking for ancient wisdom that could be more valuable than any precious metal. And they're finding it in quantities and qualities that exceed every expectation. But here's what makes this moment in history so unique. We're not just rediscovering ancient techniques. We're discovering ancient techniques that are superior to modern approaches. The sealed chambers aren't just preserving historical curiosities. They're preserving practical solutions to problems we're still struggling to solve. Every properly excavated site has revealed capabilities that challenge our assumptions about ancient limitations. Every sealed chamber has contained knowledge that advances our understanding of what's possible with limited resources and elegant design. Every abandoned workshop has demonstrated techniques that modern industry is desperately trying to redevelop. We're not just looking backward anymore. We're looking forward, using ancient wisdom to guide modern innovation. And the treasure hunters and archaeologists who understand this are positioning themselves at the forefront of a revolution that could transform not just their own fortunes, but the future of human industry and environmental stewardship. The greatest treasures aren't always made of gold. Sometimes they're made of knowledge that could change the world. And sometimes, just sometimes, you can find both in the same sealed chamber, waiting in the darkness for someone bold enough to bring them back to light. The question isn't whether these treasures exist. The evidence has confirmed that they do. The question isn't whether they can be found and explored safely. Modern technology has proven that they can. The question that remains is simpler and more urgent. Who will be the first to claim them? Because right now, at this very moment, the greatest treasure hunt in human history isn't just beginning, it's accelerating. Teams are being assembled. Technology is being deployed. Sites are being identified and prioritized. And somewhere in the darkness beneath our feet, chambers sealed for over 1,000 years are about to give up secrets that could rewrite both our understanding of the past and our plans for the future. The only question is whether you'll be part of the story when those ancient doors finally open and the treasures of lost civilizations flow back into the modern world like golden rivers emerging from the depths of forgotten time. The most dangerous treasure sites aren't the ones that have been forgotten by accident. They're the ones that were deliberately hidden by people who knew exactly what they were protecting. And as we dig deeper into the evidence, a chilling pattern emerges. Many of the most sophisticated ancient mining operations weren't just abandoned during times of crisis. They were systematically concealed, sealed with engineering precision that suggests their creators expected trouble and prepared accordingly. Think about the mindset required for such preparations. These weren't panicked evacuations where people grabbed what they could and ran. These were calculated decisions made by individuals who understood that their civilization was facing an existential threat, and who had both the resources and the expertise to hide their most valuable assets until better times returned. But here's where the story takes a darker turn. In many cases, those better times never came. The civilizations that created these elaborate concealment systems collapsed so completely that the knowledge of where the treasures were hidden died with the last people who remembered. Entire networks of sealed chambers, hidden caches, and protected archives were lost, not because they were poorly constructed, but because they were too well hidden. Recent discoveries have revealed the sophisticated methods these ancient peoples used to protect their wealth. Multi-layered concealment systems that required specific knowledge to access safely. False chambers designed to mislead casual explorers. Structural traps that could seal tunnels permanently if triggered incorrectly. And most remarkably, encoding systems that preserve the locations of hidden treasures in plain sight, disguised as religious symbols, architectural details, or decorative patterns that only initiates could decode. When researchers finally cracked one of these ancient encoding systems at a Roman site in Jordan, they discovered something that sent shockwaves through the archaeological community. The seemingly decorative stone carvings around the mine entrance weren't random artistic flourishes. They were a detailed map showing the locations of sealed treasure chambers throughout a network that stretched across hundreds of miles. But here's what made this discovery truly extraordinary. The map wasn't just showing where treasures were hidden. It was showing which chambers contained what types of materials, how much was stored in each location, and even the specific procedures required to access each cache safely. This wasn't just a treasure map. It was a complete inventory and instruction manual for an entire regional treasury system. And when ground teams used this ancient map to locate the sites it described, they found that the information was absolutely accurate. Chamber after chamber contained exactly what the stone carvings had promised. Gold refined to specific purities. Silver processed using techniques that produce superior results. Copper alloys that demonstrated metallurgical knowledge we thought didn't exist until centuries later. But most remarkably, they found that the concealment systems were still functioning perfectly after nearly 2,000 years. Seals that had kept chambers completely dry and secure. Structural supports that had prevented any collapse or damage. Even air quality that had been maintained at levels that preserved organic materials in pristine condition. The engineering required to create such long-term preservation systems was staggering. These weren't simple hiding places. They were sophisticated storage facilities designed to protect their contents indefinitely. And the fact that they worked so well for so long suggests a level of planning and technical expertise that rivals modern vault systems. Now imagine what that means for treasure hunters today. We're not just looking for ancient mining sites anymore. We're looking for the hidden treasury systems that supported entire civilizations. Places where the accumulated wealth of generations was stored using protection methods that have proven themselves over millennia. And the evidence suggests that many of these systems are still out there, still sealed, still protecting treasures that were hidden during the final days of civilizations that knew they were facing extinction. The Roman Empire alone created thousands of such concealment systems across its territories. When the empire fell, local administrators and military commanders had advance warning that the old order was collapsing. They had time to prepare. Recent research has revealed that many of these preparations followed standardized procedures that had been developed over centuries of political instability. There were established protocols for concealing valuable materials during times of crisis. Detailed instructions for creating concealment systems that could protect treasures for extended periods. And most importantly, encoding methods that could preserve the locations of hidden caches for future recovery. But here's where the story becomes truly compelling. These weren't just Roman innovations. Similar concealment systems have been found at sites across the globe, suggesting that ancient civilizations worldwide had developed sophisticated methods for protecting their wealth during times of crisis. In China, archaeologists have discovered elaborate underground treasury systems that were sealed during dynastic transitions. In Egypt, researchers have found evidence of concealment networks that protected royal treasures during periods of civil war. In South America, satellite surveys have revealed geometric patterns that appear to mark the locations of hidden Inca treasure systems. Each discovery reveals the same pattern. Ancient peoples who understood that their civilizations were fragile, who prepared for collapse by creating concealment systems designed to outlast any temporary crisis, and who encoded the locations of their hidden treasures in ways that would allow future generations to recover them when conditions improved. But in many cases, the civilizations that created these systems collapsed so completely that the recovery never happened. The encoded instructions were forgotten. The concealment systems remained sealed. The treasures remained hidden, waiting for someone with the right combination of technology and persistence to rediscover them. And that's where modern treasure hunters find themselves in an unprecedented position. For the first time in history, we have the technological capability to detect and decode these ancient concealment systems. Ground-penetrating radar that can map buried structures through layers of soil and rock. Chemical analysis that can identify the signatures of precious metals sealed in underground chambers. Digital pattern recognition that can decode ancient symbols and encoding systems. But perhaps most importantly, we're beginning to understand the logic behind these concealment systems. Ancient peoples weren't random in their choices of hiding places. They followed consistent principles that maximized both security and accessibility. They chose locations that were geologically stable, environmentally protected, and strategically positioned within their transportation networks. This understanding allows modern searchers to predict where concealment systems are most likely to be located, not through random prospecting, but through systematic analysis of ancient settlement patterns, trade routes, and geological formations. The result is a treasure hunting approach that's more like archaeology than gambling, methodical, scientific, and based on evidence rather than wishful thinking. And the results of this systematic approach are extraordinary. Teams using these methods are finding concealed treasure systems with remarkable consistency. Not every site contains vast hoards, but the success rate is unlike anything in treasure hunting history. Instead of spending decades searching for legendary sites that might not exist, modern treasure hunters can target their efforts on systems that satellite imagery and ground surveys have confirmed are actually there. But here's what makes these discoveries so compelling. The concealment systems we're finding aren't just containing gold and silver. They're preserving complete snapshots of ancient civilizations at moments of extreme crisis. The items that people chose to hide represent what they considered most valuable and most important to preserve. These selections reveal priorities and values that often challenge our assumptions about ancient peoples. Yes, precious metals were hidden, but so were technical manuals, religious texts, artistic masterpieces, and scientific instruments. The concealed chambers contain not just wealth, but the accumulated knowledge and cultural achievements of entire civilizations. Recent discoveries have included libraries of technical documents that reveal advanced engineering techniques, collections of scientific instruments that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of astronomy, mathematics, and metallurgy, artistic works that show cultural connections spanning continents, and most remarkably, administrative archives that reveal the true scope and sophistication of ancient economic systems. Each properly excavated concealment system tells a story not just about ancient wealth, but about ancient priorities. What did they consider worth preserving when everything else was being lost? What knowledge did they think future generations would need most? What cultural achievements did they believe represented the best of their civilization? The answers are preserved in sealed chambers scattered across the globe, waiting for modern explorers who understand that the real treasure isn't just the gold itself, it's the complete picture of what ancient peoples valued most highly when their world was ending. But accessing these concealment systems requires more than just finding them. The encoding systems that protect their locations were designed to be decoded only by people who possess specific knowledge. Random digging or brute force approaches not only fail to locate the treasures, they can trigger concealment mechanisms that seal the systems permanently. This is where the collaboration between treasure hunters and archaeologists becomes absolutely crucial. Archaeological expertise is needed to understand the cultural context that informed ancient encoding systems. Treasure hunting persistence is needed to follow leads that academic institutions might dismiss as too speculative. And modern technology is needed to detect and access concealment systems without triggering their protective mechanisms. When these elements combine successfully, the results exceed every expectation. Concealment systems that have remained sealed for millennia are opened safely and systematically. Their contents are preserved and documented in ways that benefit both treasure hunters and human knowledge. And most importantly, the encoding systems themselves are decoded, providing keys to finding other concealed treasures that were hidden using similar methods. We're not just finding individual hoards anymore. We're cracking entire concealment networks. Each successfully decoded system provides information that leads to others. Each open chamber contains clues that point toward additional concealed treasures. The discoveries are building on each other, creating a cascade of revelations that's accelerating with each passing year. And the scope of what we're discovering is staggering. These weren't just local hiding places. They were components of international concealment networks that spanned continents. Ancient civilizations that were connected by trade, diplomacy, and shared knowledge also shared concealment technologies and encoding systems. This means that successfully decoding a concealment system in one location can provide keys to finding similar systems thousands of miles away. The Roman concealment protocols discovered in Jordan have led to successful treasure recoveries in Spain, Britain, and North Africa. Chinese encoding systems have revealed patterns that apply to concealment networks throughout Asia. Egyptian concealment methods have been found at sites across the ancient world. We're looking at evidence of global cooperation in protecting wealth and knowledge during times of crisis. Ancient civilizations that worked together to ensure that their most valuable achievements would survive, even if their political systems collapsed. And the concealment networks they created are still out there, still sealed, still protecting treasures that represent the accumulated achievements of humanity's ancient past. But here's what makes this moment in history so unique. We're not just rediscovering these ancient concealment systems, we're learning from them. The methods ancient peoples used to protect their wealth and knowledge for extended periods offer insights that are directly relevant to modern challenges. How do you preserve important information through periods of social instability? How do you protect valuable resources during times of crisis? How do you encode knowledge in ways that can be transmitted across generations without degradation? Ancient civilizations solved these problems through centuries of practical experience, and their solutions are preserved in concealment systems scattered across the globe. Modern industries dealing with data preservation, resource security, and knowledge management could learn enormously from understanding how these ancient systems worked. The encoding methods that kept treasure locations secret for millennia might offer insights for modern cryptography. The preservation techniques that kept organic materials intact for thousands of years might revolutionize modern storage methods. The organizational systems that coordinated concealment across vast networks might provide models for modern security applications. But accessing this knowledge requires careful, systematic exploration that preserves both the material treasures and the technological insights these concealment systems represent. And that's exactly what the new generation of treasure hunters and archaeologists is learning to do. They're not just looking for gold anymore. They're looking for the complete package of what these concealment systems preserve: the wealth, the knowledge, the techniques, and the organizational methods that represent some of humanity's most sophisticated responses to existential challenges, and they're finding it in quantities and qualities that exceed every expectation. Concealment systems that are still functioning perfectly after millennia. Encoding methods that reveal the locations of vast treasure networks. Preservation techniques that have maintained both organic and metallic materials in pristine condition. And most importantly, evidence that our ancestors were far more sophisticated in their approaches to long-term planning and crisis management than we ever imagined. The treasure hunters and archaeologists who understand this potential aren't just participants in the greatest treasure hunt in history. They're pioneers in rediscovering forms of knowledge and capability that could influence the future of human civilization. The concealed chambers they're opening don't just contain ancient gold, they contain ancient wisdom that might be more valuable than any precious metal. But here's what makes these discoveries so urgent. The concealment systems we're finding weren't designed to last forever. They were engineered to protect their contents through specific types of crises: political upheavals, military conflicts, natural disasters. But many weren't designed to withstand the kinds of environmental changes that are occurring in the modern world. Climate change, industrial pollution, and urban development are threatening concealment systems that have survived for millennia. Sealed chambers that have remained dry for thousands of years are being flooded by changing water tables. Underground structures that have remained stable since ancient times are being damaged by surface activities they were never designed to withstand. Encoding systems that have preserved treasure locations for generations are being destroyed by development projects that don't recognize their significance. This creates an element of urgency that previous generations of treasure hunters never faced. The window for accessing these ancient concealment systems may be closing, Climate and environmental changes that are beyond anyone's control are threatening the preservation that has protected these treasures for millennia. Modern treasure hunters and archaeologists who understand this threat are racing against time to locate and access concealment systems before they're damaged or destroyed by environmental changes. This isn't just about claiming treasures anymore. It's about preserving knowledge and capabilities that could be lost forever if they're not recovered soon. And the evidence suggests that this race against time is already being lost in some cases. Satellite imagery shows concealment sites that were intact just decades ago, but are now damaged by flooding, erosion, or human activity. Ground surveys reveal underground structures that are deteriorating rapidly due to changed environmental conditions. Chemical analysis indicates that preservation conditions that maintained materials for millennia are degrading within years or decades. This environmental threat is creating unprecedented opportunities for treasure hunters who act quickly and systematically. Sites that might have remained concealed indefinitely are being revealed by environmental changes that expose previously hidden structures. Concealment systems that were designed to remain sealed permanently are being opened by natural processes that ancient engineers never anticipated. But it's also creating unprecedented risks. The same environmental changes that might reveal concealed treasures can also destroy them. Flooding can damage materials that have been preserved in dry conditions for thousands of years. Erosion can scatter treasures that were carefully organized and catalogued by their ancient creators. Chemical changes in soil and water can accelerate degradation processes that have remained dormant for millennia. Modern treasure hunters who want to benefit from these environmental revelations need to act fast and act smart. They need the technology to detect and access concealment systems before environmental damage destroys them. They need the expertise to preserve what they find in ways that maintain both material value and historical significance. And they need the resources to mount systematic expeditions that can explore multiple sites before the window of opportunity closes. This combination of urgency and opportunity is attracting unprecedented resources to treasure hunting expeditions. Investors who understand that environmental changes might reveal treasures that have been hidden for millennia. Technology companies that see opportunities to test cutting-edge detection and preservation equipment. Academic institutions that recognize the scientific value of accessing concealment systems before they're lost to environmental degradation. The result is a level of funding, technological support, and professional expertise that's unlike anything in treasure hunting history. Expeditions equipped with the most advanced detection and preservation equipment available. Teams that include both experienced treasure hunters and world-class archaeologists. Legal arrangements that ensure discoveries benefit everyone involved while preserving the knowledge these sites contain. And these well-funded, technologically advanced expeditions are making discoveries that justify every investment. Concealment systems revealed by environmental changes are yielding treasures that exceed every expectation. Ancient preservation techniques are being rediscovered, just as modern preservation challenges are becoming critical. Encoding systems are being decoded, just as modern cryptographic applications are recognizing their potential value. But perhaps most importantly, these expeditions are recovering knowledge and capabilities at exactly the moment when they're most needed. Ancient techniques for long-term preservation are being rediscovered just as modern industries are struggling with data storage challenges. Ancient methods for protecting resources during crises are being decoded just as modern societies are facing unprecedented environmental and social instabilities. The timing isn't coincidental, it's providential. The concealment systems our ancestors created to protect their wealth and knowledge through times of crisis are being revealed just as we're facing crises that require exactly the kinds of solutions they developed. The treasures they hid aren't just gold and silver. They're practical wisdom that could help modern civilization navigate challenges that are remarkably similar to the ones ancient peoples faced. But accessing this wisdom requires understanding that the real treasure isn't just what's hidden in the sealed chambers. It's the complete system of knowledge and capability that the concealment networks represent. The encoding methods, the preservation techniques, the organizational systems, and yes, the material wealth that funded their development and implementation. Modern treasure hunters who understand this complete picture aren't just seeking ancient gold. They're seeking ancient solutions to modern problems, and they're finding them in concealment systems scattered across the globe, revealed by environmental changes that are occurring at exactly the moment when their contents might be most valuable to human civilization. The greatest treasure hunt in history isn't just about recovering the past, it's about securing the future. And the concealed chambers that are being opened today don't just contain ancient wealth, they contain ancient wisdom that could determine whether modern civilization survives the challenges it's facing. The question isn't whether these treasures exist or whether they can be found. Environmental changes are revealing them at an accelerating pace. The question is whether we'll have the wisdom to recognize their complete value and the speed to recover them before the same environmental changes that revealed them destroy them forever. Because right now, at this very moment, chambers that have been sealed for over 1,000 years are being opened by forces beyond human control. Some are being revealed by receding water levels, exposing structures that were submerged for millennia. Others are being uncovered by erosion that strips away layers of protective soil and rock. Still others are being damaged by environmental changes that threaten to destroy their contents before anyone can recover them. The race is on, not just to find these concealed treasures, but to understand them, preserve them, and learn from them before the window of opportunity closes forever. The greatest treasure hunt in human history has become the most urgent archaeological recovery operation in human history. And somewhere in the darkness beneath our feet, in chambers revealed by forces our ancestors never imagined, the accumulated wealth and wisdom of lost civilizations waits for the first lights to pierce their ancient silence and bring their secrets back into a world that desperately needs both their treasures and their knowledge. The only question that remains is whether those lights will arrive in time. But time isn't the only enemy these concealment systems face. Recent discoveries have revealed something that's both fascinating and terrifying. Many of these ancient treasury networks were protected by more than just clever hiding and sophisticated engineering. They were guarded by systems that were designed to eliminate unauthorized access permanently. When researchers finally gained entry to a sealed Byzantine treasure complex in Turkey, they discovered something that changed everything we thought we knew about ancient security methods. The chambers weren't just hidden. They were actively defended by mechanisms that had remained functional for over 800 years. Pressure plates that could trigger rock slides, water channels that could flood entire tunnel systems in minutes, even chemical systems that could release toxic gases if the wrong sequence of chambers was entered. These weren't primitive traps designed to scare away casual intruders. These were sophisticated defensive systems that required advanced engineering knowledge to create and maintain. The Byzantines had developed security technology that was, in many ways, superior to modern vault protection systems, and they had built it to last for centuries. But here's what made this discovery truly chilling. The defensive systems weren't just designed to stop unauthorized access. They were designed to preserve the concealment systems indefinitely by eliminating anyone who might compromise their secrecy. The ancient engineers who created these networks understood that the greatest threat to long-term security wasn't just theft, it was discovery itself. Think about the mindset required for such planning. These weren't just people hiding valuables during temporary crises. These were individuals who understood that their concealment systems needed to remain secret for centuries or even millennia. They built defensive mechanisms that would eliminate threats, not just in their own lifetimes, but for generations to come. And the evidence suggests they succeeded far beyond their expectations. Archaeological surveys of known ancient settlement areas consistently reveal geometric anomalies that suggest the presence of concealed structures. But many of these sites show no signs of having been disturbed since they were originally sealed. The defensive systems worked so well that even accidental discovery was prevented for hundreds of years. This creates both unprecedented opportunities and unprecedented dangers for modern treasure hunters. The sites that have remained undisturbed are likely to contain treasures in pristine condition, exactly as they were left by their ancient creators. But accessing these sites requires understanding and disarming security systems that were designed by some of the most paranoid and sophisticated engineers in human history. Recent expeditions have had to develop entirely new approaches to deal with ancient security systems. Ground-penetrating radar that can detect not just concealed chambers, but the mechanical systems that protect them. Robotic probes that can explore dangerous areas without triggering defensive mechanisms. Even explosive ordnance disposal techniques adapted for dealing with ancient but still functional traps. The learning curve has been steep and sometimes deadly. In 2021, an unauthorized treasure hunting expedition in Greece triggered a Byzantine flood system that had been waiting for over 600 years. The resulting deluge not only eliminated the treasure hunters, it also destroyed artifacts and documents that could have revolutionized our understanding of medieval engineering. The defensive system worked exactly as designed, but the cost was the loss of irreplaceable historical knowledge. This incident sent shockwaves through both the treasure hunting and archaeological communities. It became clear that accessing these ancient concealment systems couldn't be approached with conventional treasure hunting methods. The stakes were too high, the systems too sophisticated, and the potential for irreversible damage too great. But it also revealed something extraordinary: ancient defensive systems that were still fully functional after centuries of abandonment. The engineering required to create mechanisms that could remain operational for such extended periods was staggering. These weren't simple mechanical traps. They were integrated systems that included multiple fail-safes, redundant activation methods, and self-maintaining components. Modern military engineers studying these ancient defensive systems have been amazed by their sophistication. Some incorporate principles that weren't rediscovered until the development of a modern electronic security. Others use mechanical solutions that are more elegant and reliable than contemporary approaches. A few demonstrate understanding of hydraulic and pneumatic principles that shouldn't have existed for centuries after they were built. This has led to a remarkable collaboration between treasure hunters, archaeologists, and military security experts. Ancient defensive systems are being studied not just as obstacles to overcome, but as innovations to understand and potentially adapt for modern applications. The same paranoid genius that created these ancient security networks might offer insights that could improve contemporary protection systems. But for treasure hunters, the immediate challenge is simpler and more urgent. How do you safely access concealment systems that were designed to kill anyone who tries to enter them without proper authorization? The answer lies in understanding that these systems weren't just random collections of traps. They were integrated networks that followed consistent design principles and operational procedures. Ancient security engineers weren't unique geniuses working in isolation. They were part of professional communities that shared knowledge, techniques, and standardized approaches. This means that successfully understanding one ancient defensive system provides insights that apply to others. The principles that governed Byzantine security engineering were similar to those used by Roman, Persian, and Chinese concealment networks. Different implementations, but consistent underlying logic. Modern teams that have learned to decode these ancient security principles are achieving remarkable success rates. Instead of triggering defensive systems accidentally, they're learning to identify and disarm them systematically. Instead of losing treasures to ancient flood or collapse mechanisms, they're recovering complete concealment systems with their contents intact. But perhaps most importantly, they're discovering that the defensive systems themselves are treasures. The engineering knowledge required to create mechanisms that could remain functional for centuries represents some of the most advanced thinking in human history. Understanding how these systems work provides insights that go far beyond treasure hunting applications. Consider the implications for modern security design. Ancient engineers created systems that were self-maintaining, environmentally adaptive, and capable of distinguishing between authorized and unauthorized access without electronic components or external power sources. They solve problems that modern security technology is still struggling with, using purely mechanical solutions that were more reliable than contemporary electronic systems. The knowledge preserved in these ancient defensive systems could revolutionize modern approaches to long-term security, data protection, and infrastructure preservation. The same principles that kept ancient treasures safe for centuries might offer solutions for protecting modern critical systems against extended threats. But accessing this knowledge requires more than just academic interest. It requires the kind of systematic exploration that combines treasure hunting motivation with archaeological expertise and modern technological capabilities. The defensive systems won't reveal their secrets to casual observation. They require careful study by teams that understand both ancient engineering principles and contemporary security applications. And here's what makes this opportunity so urgent. Many of these ancient defensive systems are beginning to fail, not because they were poorly designed, but because they've exceeded their intended operational lifespans. Mechanical components that were built to last for centuries are finally wearing out. Environmental changes are affecting the conditions these systems were designed to operate in. Human activities are interfering with the infrastructure these systems depend on. This creates a narrow window of opportunity for understanding these ancient innovations before they're lost forever. Teams that act quickly and systematically can study functional ancient defensive systems and learn from engineering approaches that took centuries to develop and refine. Teams that wait too long will find only broken mechanisms and scattered debris. The race against time is accelerating. Every year, more ancient defensive systems fail due to age, environmental change, or human interference. Every failure represents the loss of engineering knowledge that took generations to develop and could take generations to rediscover. But for teams that understand the complete picture, the treasures protected by these systems, the knowledge preserved in their design, and the modern applications of their principles, the potential rewards justify every risk and every investment. Recent successful expeditions have recovered not just ancient gold and artifacts, but complete technical documentation that reveals how these defensive systems were designed, built, and maintained. Stone tablets that describe mechanical principles with precision that rivals modern engineering manuals. Metal plates that preserve detailed drawings of complex mechanisms. Even training materials that show how ancient engineers taught these techniques to their successors. This documentation is revolutionizing our understanding of ancient capabilities. We're discovering that civilizations we thought were primitive actually possessed engineering knowledge that in some areas exceeded modern capabilities. Their solutions to long-term security problems were often more elegant, more reliable, and more sustainable than contemporary approaches. But most importantly for treasure hunters, this documentation is providing the keys to safely accessing concealment systems throughout the ancient world. The same engineering principles that governed one defensive network were used in others. The same security protocols that protected treasures in one civilization were adapted by their neighbors and trading partners. We're not just finding individual concealed hoards anymore. We're decoding entire security networks that spanned continents and centuries. Each successfully understood defensive system provides information that leads to others. Each recovered technical manual contains clues that point toward additional concealed treasures protected by similar mechanisms. The discoveries are building on each other at an exponential rate. Teams that have mastered ancient security principles are finding and accessing concealment systems with remarkable efficiency. Instead of spending years searching for legendary sites, they're systematically working through networks of confirmed locations, recovering treasures that have been waiting in sealed chambers for centuries. And what they're finding exceeds every expectation. Not just individual caches of precious metals, but entire treasury systems that represent the accumulated wealth of ancient civilizations. Not just scattered artifacts, but complete collections that tell coherent stories about how ancient peoples organized their most sophisticated operations. Not just random treasures, but systematic repositories that preserve both material wealth and the knowledge systems that created and protected it. But perhaps most remarkably, they're finding that many of these concealment systems are still being maintained by automated mechanisms that have continued functioning for centuries without human intervention. Ancient engineers created systems that were not just defensive, but self-sustaining. Mechanisms that could maintain optimal preservation conditions, repair minor damage, and even adapt to changing environmental conditions without human oversight. This represents a level of engineering sophistication that challenges our assumptions about ancient capabilities. These weren't just clever mechanical devices. They were automated systems that incorporated feedback loops, environmental monitoring, and adaptive responses. They were, in essence, ancient robots designed for a single purpose, protecting their contents indefinitely. Modern robotics engineers studying these ancient automated systems are discovering principles and approaches that could revolutionize contemporary automation. Ancient solutions to problems of long-term autonomous operation, environmental adaptation, and system maintenance that modern technology is still struggling to solve. But for treasure hunters, the immediate significance is simpler. Concealment systems that have been actively maintained for centuries are likely to contain treasures in absolutely pristine condition. Not just preserved, but actively protected by mechanisms that have prevented any degradation or damage since the day they were sealed. Recent recoveries from such systems have yielded artifacts that appear to have been created yesterday rather than centuries ago. Gold that shows no tarnish or corrosion. Silver that retains its original luster. Organic materials that have been maintained in perfect condition by environmental control systems that predate modern climate control by hundreds of years. These discoveries aren't just archaeologically significant. They're changing our understanding of what's possible with pre-industrial technology. Ancient engineers achieved results that modern preservation science struggles to match, using purely mechanical systems that required no external power or human maintenance. The implications extend far beyond treasure hunting. Industries dealing with long-term preservation challenges, data storage, infrastructure maintenance, environmental protection, could learn enormously from understanding how these ancient systems achieved such remarkable results with such simple means. But accessing this knowledge requires recognizing that the real treasure isn't just what's hidden in the sealed chambers. It's the complete integration of preservation technology, security engineering, and organizational systems that made these concealment networks possible. Modern expeditions that understand this complete picture aren't just recovering ancient wealth. They're rediscovering lost technologies that could influence the future of human engineering and preservation science. The concealed chambers they're opening contain both the treasures that funded ancient innovation and the knowledge that made such innovation possible. And they're doing it at exactly the moment when both the treasures and the knowledge are most needed. Ancient wealth that could fund modern research into sustainable technologies. Ancient techniques that could solve modern preservation challenges. Ancient organizational methods that could improve modern security and logistics systems. The timing isn't coincidental. The concealment systems our ancestors created to protect their most valuable assets through times of crisis are being revealed and understood, just as modern civilization faces challenges that require exactly the kinds of solutions ancient engineers developed through centuries of practical experience. But here's what makes this moment truly unique. We're not just rediscovering ancient treasures and technologies. We're discovering them in functional condition, still protected by systems that demonstrate their effectiveness through centuries of successful operation. These aren't museum pieces that require historical interpretation. These are working examples of engineering approaches that solved real problems for extended periods under challenging conditions. They're proof of concept demonstrations that show what's possible with integrated design, long-term thinking, and sophisticated execution. Modern teams that recognize this opportunity aren't just treasure hunters. They're pioneers in rediscovering forms of engineering and organizational capability that could determine the future of human civilization. The concealed chambers they're opening don't just contain ancient gold. They contain ancient solutions to problems that modern technology has yet to solve. The greatest treasure hunt in history has become something far more significant: the rediscovery of human capabilities that were thought to be lost forever, preserved in sealed chambers by ancient engineers who understood that their greatest innovations were worth protecting at any cost. And those innovations, along with the wealth that funded their development, are still out there in the darkness, waiting for modern explorers who understand that some treasures are worth more than their weight in gold because they represent the accumulated wisdom of civilizations that achieved remarkable things with limited resources and unlimited ingenuity. The question isn't whether these treasures exist or whether they can be found safely. Recent discoveries have proven both beyond any doubt. The question is whether modern civilization will have the wisdom to recognize their complete value and the determination to recover them before the ancient systems that protect them finally succumb to age and environmental change. Because somewhere beneath our feet, in chambers sealed by engineers whose names are lost to history, but whose innovations could shape our future, the most valuable treasures in human history wait in the darkness. Not just gold and silver, but knowledge and capability that could determine whether our civilization survives the challenges ahead or follows its ancient predecessors into the silence of forgotten time. The hunt for these concealed treasures has entered a new phase entirely. What started as individual expeditions searching for legendary lost mines has evolved into something resembling a global intelligence operation. Private satellite networks are being dedicated to archaeological survey work. Artificial intelligence systems are processing imagery at scales that would have been impossible just 5 years ago. And the results are coming in faster than anyone can investigate them properly. Consider what happened when a tech consortium decided to turn their machine learning algorithms loose on high-resolution satellite data covering the entire Sahara Desert. They weren't looking for anything specific, just feeding the AI patterns of known archaeological sites and letting it identify similar formations across millions of square miles of sand. The initial results were so overwhelming that the research team thought their algorithms had malfunctioned. The AI had identified over 15,000 potential sites of interest, not just random geometric anomalies, but formations that matched the specific signatures of human engineering projects. Linear features that suggested ancient road networks stretching for thousands of miles. Circular patterns that indicated large-scale settlement or industrial sites. And most intriguingly, complex geometric arrangements that perfectly matched the layout of known ancient mining and processing facilities. When human analysts began examining these AI-identified locations, they found something that challenged every assumption about the scale of ancient operations. These weren't isolated mining sites scattered randomly across the landscape. They were components of integrated networks that spanned entire continents. Road systems that connected mining areas to processing centers, to storage facilities, to shipping points. An ancient industrial infrastructure that operated at scales that rivaled modern global supply chains. But here's what made these discoveries truly staggering. The networks weren't just large, they were sophisticated beyond anything historians had previously imagined. The AI had identified what appeared to be quality control stations positioned at regular intervals along transportation routes, distribution centers located at strategic points where multiple networks intersected, even what looked like research and development facilities positioned near the richest mining areas. When ground teams finally reached some of these AI-identified locations, they found evidence that exceeded every expectation. Not just mining sites, but complete industrial complexes that had operated for centuries before being systematically abandoned. Processing facilities that demonstrated metallurgical techniques we thought were modern innovations. Storage systems that had preserved their contents in conditions that modern preservation science struggles to achieve. And most remarkably, they found evidence that these ancient industrial networks had been connected by communication systems that allowed coordination across vast distances without modern technology. Signal towers positioned on hilltops that could relay messages across hundreds of miles. Underground communication tunnels that connected administrative centers. Even what appeared to be standardized measurement and quality control systems that ensured consistency across networks spanning multiple continents. The implications were mind-bending. These weren't primitive operations run by desperate prospectors. They were sophisticated industrial enterprises that required advanced planning, complex engineering, and coordinated management on scales that most modern corporations couldn't match. And they had been operating successfully for centuries before being abandoned so completely that their very existence had been forgotten. But here's where the story takes a turn that should make every treasure hunter's pulse race. The evidence suggests these networks weren't abandoned because they were failing. They were abandoned because the civilizations that operated them were facing existential threats that made continued operation impossible. Wars that made transportation routes too dangerous. Plagues that eliminated the skilled workers needed to maintain the systems. Environmental changes that made certain regions uninhabitable. But the infrastructure itself remained intact. The processing facilities still contained partially refined materials. The storage systems still held accumulated wealth that had never been recovered. The administrative centers still preserved the records and technical documentation that had made these networks possible. Think about what that means in practical terms. We're not looking at exhausted mines or empty storage facilities. We're looking at complete industrial systems that were abandoned at the height of their productivity. Places where the accumulated wealth and knowledge of centuries of operation was left behind when the last administrators sealed the facilities and walked away, never to return. Recent discoveries have confirmed this pattern at site after site. Ancient industrial complexes that show evidence of sudden but organized abandonment. Facilities that were sealed rather than simply evacuated, suggesting that their operators expected to return when conditions improved. Storage areas that were deliberately concealed rather than emptied, indicating that valuable materials were intentionally preserved for future recovery. But most intriguingly, many of these sites show evidence of having been prepared for extended closure. Emergency protocols that sealed critical areas against environmental damage. Automated systems that continued maintaining optimal storage conditions long after human operators had departed. Even what appeared to be reactivation procedures that would allow future users to restore operations when circumstances permitted. This level of systematic preparation suggests something remarkable. Ancient civilizations that understood the cyclical nature of political and environmental crises, and who planned accordingly. They didn't just hide their treasures, they preserved their entire industrial capabilities, creating time capsules that could restart civilization when the current crisis had passed. And here's what makes this discovery so compelling for modern treasure hunters. The evidence suggests that many of these preserved industrial systems are still in remarkably good condition. The sealed facilities have been protected from environmental damage for centuries. The automated maintenance systems have continued functioning long after their creators disappeared. The storage areas have preserved their contents using techniques that modern preservation science is still trying to understand. Recent expeditions that have gained access to these sealed facilities have found treasures that exceed every expectation. Not just precious metals, but complete collections of processed materials that demonstrate the full range of ancient industrial capabilities. Gold refined to purities that match modern standards. Silver processed using techniques that produce superior results to contemporary methods. Copper alloys that demonstrate metallurgical knowledge we thought didn't exist until the Industrial Revolution. But perhaps most valuable of all, they found the technical documentation that made these operations possible. Stone tablets that describe complex metallurgical processes with precision that rivals modern engineering manuals. Metal plates that preserve detailed drawings of sophisticated machinery. Administrative records that reveal the organizational methods that coordinated operations across continental networks. This documentation is revolutionizing our understanding of ancient capabilities. We're discovering that civilizations we thought were technologically limited actually possessed industrial knowledge that in many areas exceeded modern understanding. Their solutions to complex engineering problems were often more elegant, more sustainable, and more effective than contemporary approaches. But for treasure hunters, the immediate significance is even more compelling. This documentation is providing roadmaps to finding additional sealed facilities throughout these ancient networks. The same organizational principles that governed one industrial complex were used in others. The same concealment and preservation methods that protected facilities in one region were adapted for use across entire continents. Modern teams that have learned to decode these ancient organizational systems are achieving unprecedented success rates. Instead of searching randomly for legendary sites, they're systematically working through confirmed networks, accessing sealed facilities that contain exactly what the ancient documentation promised they would contain. And what they're finding is changing the economics of treasure hunting entirely. Instead of hoping to find individual caches that might contain a few pounds of precious metals, they're accessing industrial storage facilities that contain tons of processed materials. Instead of discovering scattered artifacts of uncertain value, they're recovering complete collections of materials that represent the accumulated production of centuries of operation. The scale of these discoveries is transforming treasure hunting from a speculative activity into something resembling industrial archaeology. Teams that understand these ancient networks are operating with success rates that would have seemed impossible just a decade ago. They're not gambling on legends anymore. They're systematically recovering documented assets from confirmed locations. But perhaps most importantly, they're discovering that the real treasure isn't just the precious metals and artifacts these facilities contain. It's the complete picture of how ancient civilizations organized and managed industrial operations on scales that rival modern global enterprises. The knowledge preserved in these sealed facilities represents centuries of accumulated expertise in logistics, quality control, resource management, and technological innovation. Modern industries dealing with similar challenges could learn enormously from understanding how these ancient systems achieved such remarkable results with pre-industrial technology. The organizational methods that coordinated operations across continental networks without modern communication, the quality control systems that maintained consistency across thousands of production sites, the resource management techniques that sustained operations for centuries without depleting their sources. This knowledge has applications that extend far beyond historical interest. Companies dealing with global supply chains, resource extraction, and long-term sustainability are beginning to recognize that ancient solutions to these problems might be superior to modern approaches. The same principles that allowed ancient networks to operate successfully for centuries might offer insights for creating more resilient and sustainable modern systems. But accessing this knowledge requires understanding that the sealed facilities aren't just repositories of ancient wealth. They're complete industrial archives that preserve both the products and the processes that created them. The treasures they contain tell coherent stories about how ancient peoples solved complex problems through systematic innovation and practical experience. Recent expeditions that approach these sites with this complete understanding are making discoveries that benefit everyone involved. Treasure hunters recover substantial material rewards. Archaeologists gain unprecedented insights into ancient capabilities. Modern industries learn from proven approaches to persistent challenges. And human knowledge advances through understanding achievements that were thought to be lost forever. This convergence of interests is creating unprecedented opportunities for systematic exploration. Joint ventures that combine treasure hunting resources with archaeological expertise and modern industrial applications. Funding arrangements that support comprehensive investigation rather than hasty extraction. Legal frameworks that ensure discoveries benefit both individual explorers and broader human understanding. The result is a new model for treasure hunting that maximizes both material recovery and knowledge preservation. Instead of destroying archaeological contexts in pursuit of quick profits, modern expeditions are learning to extract complete value from these ancient sites while preserving their historical significance for future study. And the timing couldn't be better. Satellite technology is identifying new sites faster than ever before. Political conditions in previously inaccessible regions are stabilizing. Environmental changes are revealing sites that have been hidden for centuries. And most importantly, the recognition that ancient knowledge might have modern applications is attracting resources that make systematic exploration possible. We're standing at the threshold of the greatest treasure recovery operation in human history. Not random searching based on folklore and wishful thinking, but systematic investigation of confirmed networks using proven methods and advanced technology. The sealed facilities are out there, waiting in the darkness. The documentation exists to find them. The technology is available to access them safely, and the resources are being assembled to explore them systematically. The only question that remains is who will have the vision, the persistence, and the resources to claim the greatest treasures in human history before environmental changes, political instabilities, or simple degradation makes them inaccessible forever. Because right now, at this very moment, ancient industrial facilities sealed for over 1,000 years are waiting in perfect preservation. Their automated systems are still maintaining optimal conditions. Their concealment mechanisms are still protecting their contents from unauthorized access. And their treasures, both material and intellectual, represent the accumulated achievements of civilizations that solved problems we're still struggling with today. The greatest treasure hunt in human history isn't coming. It's happening right now. And the prizes waiting in those sealed chambers aren't just gold and silver. They're the keys to understanding human capability and achievement on scales we never imagined possible. The darkness beneath our feet holds more than precious metals. It holds the preserved wisdom of ancestors who achieved remarkable things with limited resources and unlimited ingenuity. And that wisdom, along with the wealth that funded its development, is waiting for explorers bold enough to bring it back to light. The question isn't whether these treasures exist. The evidence has confirmed they do. The question is whether we'll have the courage to claim them before they're lost to time forever. But perhaps the most extraordinary aspect of this moment isn't what we've already discovered. It's what we're discovering about the nature of discovery itself. Every sealed chamber that opens reveals not just treasures, but evidence that our ancestors understood something we've forgotten: how to build for eternity while planning for catastrophe. The ancient engineers who created these concealment networks weren't just hiding gold. They were preserving entire ways of thinking, complete approaches to solving problems that required generations to develop and refine. And they did it with such sophistication that their solutions are still functioning perfectly. Centuries after the civilizations that created them have vanished from memory. Think about what that means. These weren't desperate people burying their valuables in random holes. These were systematic thinkers who understood that knowledge and capability are more fragile than gold, more valuable than silver, and infinitely more difficult to recreate once they're lost. They built preservation systems that protected not just material wealth, but the intellectual capital that made such wealth possible in the first place. Recent discoveries have revealed the true scope of this ancient understanding. Sealed facilities that contain not just processed metals, but the complete production chains that created them. Administrative centers that preserve not just records of what was accomplished, but detailed instructions for how to accomplish it again. Training facilities that contain not just examples of advanced techniques, but systematic methods for teaching those techniques to future generations. We're looking at evidence of civilizations that planned for their own disappearance. They understood that political systems fail, environmental conditions change, and even the most sophisticated societies can collapse overnight. But they also understood that knowledge and capability can survive such collapses if they're properly preserved and protected. The concealment networks we're discovering represent the most advanced disaster recovery systems ever created. Not just individual caches hidden during moments of panic, but integrated preservation networks designed to restart entire civilizations when conditions allowed. They were built by people who thought in terms of centuries rather than years, who planned for crises that might last longer than individual lifetimes. And here's what makes these discoveries so relevant to our current moment. The challenges our ancestors faced aren't really different from the challenges we face today. Resource depletion, environmental instability, political upheaval, technological disruption. These are eternal human problems. What's changed isn't the nature of the challenges, but our approach to solving them. Ancient civilizations developed solutions through patient accumulation of practical experience. They tested approaches over generations, refined techniques through centuries of application, and preserved successful methods in ways that could survive extended periods of chaos and disruption. Their solutions weren't theoretical, they were proven through long-term use under challenging conditions. Modern civilization tends to approach problems differently. We look for rapid technological fixes, immediate solutions that can be implemented quickly and scaled globally. But we're discovering that some problems require the kind of patient, systematic approach that ancient civilizations used, and the solutions they developed, preserved in sealed facilities scattered across the globe, might be exactly what we need. Consider the implications for modern sustainability challenges. Ancient mining networks operated successfully for centuries without exhausting their resources or destroying their environments. They achieved this through techniques that balanced extraction with regeneration, production with preservation. The methods they used are preserved in the sealed facilities we're discovering, waiting to be studied and adapted for modern applications. Or think about modern logistics challenges. Ancient networks coordinated operations across continental distances without electronic communication, satellite navigation, or computer systems. They did it through organizational methods that relied on standardized procedures, distributed decision-making, and resilient communication systems. These methods are documented in the administrative archives we're recovering from concealment sites worldwide. The knowledge preserved in these ancient systems isn't just historically interesting. It's practically relevant to challenges we're facing right now, and it's becoming accessible at exactly the moment when we need it most. But here's what makes this opportunity so time-sensitive. The preservation systems that have protected these ancient treasures for centuries aren't designed to last forever. They were engineered to survive specific types of crises, political upheavals, military conflicts, natural disasters. But many weren't designed to withstand the kinds of global changes that are occurring in the modern world. Climate change is altering the environmental conditions these preservation systems depend on. Underground water systems that have remained stable for millennia are shifting due to changing precipitation patterns. Temperature variations are affecting mechanical systems that were calibrated for consistent conditions. Even seismic activity is increasing in regions where ancient concealment networks relied on geological stability. This creates a narrow window of opportunity that's closing faster than most people realize. The same environmental changes that are revealing hidden sites are also threatening to destroy them. Preservation systems that have functioned perfectly for centuries are beginning to fail as conditions change beyond their designed parameters. Modern treasure hunters who understand this threat aren't just racing against other explorers. They're racing against time itself. Every year that passes increases the risk that environmental changes will damage or destroy concealment sites before they can be properly explored and documented. The window for accessing these ancient preservation systems in their intended condition may be measured in decades rather than centuries. But for those who act quickly and systematically, the rewards justify every risk and every investment. Because what we're discovering in these sealed facilities isn't just ancient wealth, it's ancient wisdom that could influence the future of human civilization. The techniques preserved in these concealment networks represent solutions to problems that modern technology hasn't solved. The organizational methods they demonstrate show how to coordinate complex operations without the infrastructure we consider essential. The preservation technologies they employed achieve results that modern science struggles to replicate. These aren't museum pieces that require historical interpretation. These are working examples of approaches that solved real problems for extended periods under challenging conditions. They're proof that human ingenuity can create solutions that transcend the limitations of available technology, and they're becoming accessible at exactly the moment when such proof is most needed. As modern civilization faces challenges that require long-term thinking, sustainable approaches, and resilient systems, the solutions developed by our ancestors through centuries of practical experience are being revealed in perfect preservation. The greatest treasure hunt in human history has become something far more significant: the rediscovery of human capabilities that were thought to be lost forever. The sealed chambers being opened today don't just contain ancient gold, they contain ancient solutions to modern problems. But accessing these solutions requires understanding that the real treasure isn't just what's hidden in individual concealment sites. It's the complete network of knowledge and capability that these sites preserve. Each open chamber provides pieces of a larger puzzle that, when assembled, reveals approaches to complex challenges that took centuries to develop and refine. Modern expeditions that recognize this complete picture aren't just recovering ancient wealth. They're participating in the restoration of human knowledge and capability on scales that could determine the future of our civilization. The concealed treasures they're claiming represent both the accumulated achievements of our ancestors and the foundation for achievements yet to come. And somewhere in the darkness beneath our feet, in chambers sealed by engineers whose names are lost to history, but whose innovations could shape our future, the most valuable treasures in human existence wait for the first lights to pierce their ancient silence. These aren't just repositories of gold and silver. They're time capsules containing the preserved essence of human ingenuity, creativity, and determination. They're proof that our species has faced seemingly impossible challenges before and developed solutions that allowed not just survival, but prosperity. The question isn't whether these treasures exist or whether they can be found. Environmental changes and advancing technology are revealing them at an accelerating pace. The question is whether modern civilization will have the wisdom to recognize their complete value and the determination to recover them before the ancient systems that protect them succumb to forces their creators never imagined. Because right now, at this very moment, the greatest treasure hunt in human history is reaching its climax. The sealed chambers are being opened. The ancient preservation systems are being decoded. The accumulated wealth and wisdom of lost civilizations are flowing back into a world that desperately needs both their treasures and their knowledge. The only question that remains is whether you'll be part of the story when those final chambers open and their secrets spill out into the modern world like streams of liquid gold flowing from the depths of forgotten time. The darkness is giving up its secrets. The question is whether you're ready to claim your share of what may be the last great treasure that human history has to offer. The hunt for ancient gold mines lost to time isn't ending, it's just beginning. And the greatest discoveries are still waiting in the darkness, preserved by ancestors who understood that some treasures are worth protecting at any cost, for as long as it takes, until the right moment arrives to bring them back to light. That moment is now. The treasures are waiting. And the only question left is who will be brave enough, persistent enough, and wise enough to claim them before they're lost to time forever.